Yeah, anyway, go ahead with any questions you guys may have. So we, like I said, guys, for those, there's a couple of people just chiming in right now. I see Tim, you just joined us. We don't have anything that we're presenting. We don't have anything prepared today. The purpose of the call today is just to answer your guys' questions, anything that you guys may have. I'll share my screen if a question is asked that warrants, showing something on screen. But other than that, it's really just kind of an open discussion with you guys.
Okay, I don't really have any questions. So.
Okay. Just listening in then?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there, I've asked a couple times, but are there any questions? A couple of the example questions that I put out in the, in the meeting invite is why did I get an email about a particular record in Site Manager? Why can't I find my contract? Why did the sampling checklist recently change or get moved? Are any of those questions things that you guys are curious about the answers to, or is that something you guys all understand?
Hey, Ty, this is District 6. I guess we got some proportion report questions.
Okay, shoot, go ahead.
Somehow, we got to take away from working on it in standalone. It won't calculate in the field. If you pick a mixed design, there's a lot of stuff you can't do. And if you don't pick mixed design, there's a lot of stuff you can't do. So we're just wondering if that's somewhere going to be in the works to get that fixed so we can do more work in the field.
Sure. Okay, so let me see if I can, address, because I think there's a couple components to the question there. So, the gist of it is you're trying to use the proportions template in standalone, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you referenced that there's two versions of the proportions template in Site Manager. There's the one that you can pull in mixed design information, and that's the one that you referred to as the mixed design proportions template. And then there's the alternate template, which is what we call the no mixed design template. Both templates are acceptable, most of the time for most concrete that you're pouring. You're very unlikely to use the proportions template that utilizes the mixed design functionality with, a 47 BD concrete, just because there are no mixed designs there, right? But if you find yourself, wanting to use standalone, it's acceptable to utilize, the no mixed design template for a 47B concrete. And the reason that I'm saying it's acceptable to use that template is because that template is the only one that will, of the two, it's the only one that will probably work in standalone. And the reason for that is the mixed design template for proportions, the first thing that you do on that template is you pick a mixed design that you are, relating that proportions to, if you will. And when you can't, in that drop down that you see on the template, that only works when you're in server mode, because the information on the mixed designs only exists on the server. Unfortunately, we haven't, the system isn't supporting a way for us to do checkout of sample records, down to your standalone environment. And since our mixed designs right now are sample records, there isn't a good method for us to extract that information, and bring it across over to your proportions in a standalone environment. So since that information doesn't exist in standalone, that template unfortunately won't work in standalone. And that again is the mixed design proportions template. Hopefully this is all jiving and making sense to you guys. But if you're wanting to work in standalone, our recommendation would be, and you're doing PCC sample records and you want to do, a complete record as much as you can, our recommendation would be to use the no mixed design PCC proportion template. And when you're referencing you can't do things, I guess maybe I'd ask if there's a little clarification that can be had on that part. Understanding that the proportions template just doesn't work in standalone, But the no mix design one should work. It's just you're supplying a lot more information, or some more information than what you were supplying with the, with the other template. Is that at all answering the question for you guys? District 6, is that answering your question?
Yeah, sorry, we were having a little open forum discussion here. I didn't want to unmute while we were talking.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, that part makes sense as far as not pulling the mix design information down, but they're saying that even on the no mix design one, that it's not performing the, running the calculations and stuff as they're populating the fields.
It doesn't
Okay,
give you
well,
water ratios or that kind of information.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
He's saying it doesn't give you the water cement ratios and some of those calculated fields as they're populating all the user inputs.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to note. Have you guys reported that to us before?
Not that we know of it, yes.
Okay. Well, we can take that as an action item. I don't know that I'll be able to answer exactly why that's not working right now on the call. A couple of my, Andy and Zach are on the call right now, and we can, try to look into it and maybe come back with an answer yet during the time here. But I can't guarantee we'll have an answer, but we'll definitely look into it.
Okay, thanks.
Hey guys, this is Andy. If somebody could send me some examples or sample records that I could start to look at and ferret out this problem, that would be great.
Let me ask a clarifying question to further clarify this issue. Is this something that you guys only see when you're in standalone? Does it behave the same way in server mode?
No, they're saying it calculates fine in server mode. It's only in standalone.
Only in standalone. Okay. The reason for that question is Andy's request for examples. If we look at those sample records after they've been ported into the server, we may no longer, I'm guessing we may no longer see the issue there. So we'll have to, try to mimic this in a standalone environment here locally. Is there anybody, who in District 6 would be willing to chat with us after the call today and, do a one-on-one WebEx to see if we can, totally replicate this issue here?
Yeah, Gary said Sherry'd volunteer for us.
All right, that works. We'll reach out to you guys after the call and see if we can replicate this. Other questions? Did anybody else on the call? Do we need to see the proportions templates just so everybody's on the same page as far as what we're talking about?
This is Sharon. I guess since we're talking about that proportion report page, there's a couple of columns in there that does not fill out when you print it out. Is there a reason for that?
Okay, yes. So the printing of the templates, we are aware. I know what you're talking about. I don't know that I can name the specific columns that aren't printing.
The pound is the 564 or 658, and then also the percent required.
Yeah. So the target weight of cement.
Right.
We're not certain as to why that's not printing, and we've because the printing of templates has been proven very difficult to keep supported the past couple years, and given that we are going to be transitioning to a new system here in the next couple years as well, what we've decided at this time is to not try to exert a lot of effort to try to discover what may be causing that. Because what we may discover is that it's something we can't fix anyway. So we've made the decision to basically recommend that we don't print these templates anymore, or at least not print them using the print button. If printing out this template is something that you find absolutely necessary to do, the recommendation that we have is that you use your print screen functionality. So you'll just hit the print screen button on your keyboard, and then you can, if you have the application GreenShot installed, you can actually just draw a box over the template and then click print from there. Or once you do this print screen, it will you can go paste that into like Paint or something and then print that from there. It's unfortunate that it's not working. You know, we just haven't been able to. It's something that we've fixed other things in the past with the printing, and as soon as, you know, Microsoft updates something in the operating system or with another component that Site Manager utilizes, you know, it breaks it again. So it's just been very difficult to support.
Okay.
So we do apologize if that is an inconvenience, but given where we're going in the future with the new system that will be web-based, we don't have, you know, there definitely won't be any recommendation to print those test data input screens, what you know as templates now. They'll have a new name in the web system, but essentially they'll be your template screens. You know, those are going to look a little bit different than what they look now, but we definitely won't be recommending printing those. If, you know, you need to present the data, you know, to a contractor or something like that, if that's a common thing that everybody needs to do, even now, if it's a common thing that you guys do, we're more than happy to create a report that can be run on the report portal. You know, that will, you know, give the, you know, kind of the official report look to our test results. Is that kind of answering your question, or at least
Yeah.
addressing
that's fine.
some of it?
I just I print it out and then I just write it in before I click out of my. Because sometimes the contractor wants to know what his percent is doing.
Yeah, and that's certainly an option too. You can print it as is and then write the numbers back in.
Yeah.
But if you want what's actually displayed on the template to print, you know, then we recommend using the print screen, which is actually a pretty easy thing to do, assuming you have the GreenShot installed on your computer, which I think most of us do. And if you don't, I'm sure you can make a request to have it put on your computer.
Okay.
Pretty handy tool. Like I said too, if this is a common thing that you know, a lot of you guys are needing to do, we'll create an official report for it. That way you can present that information to contractors or whoever's consuming that test information from you. Yeah, I just had somebody share a point with me too, that, you know, if this is something contractors are frequently interested in, just kind of spitballing off of, you know, Sharon's topic here, if this is something that they are constantly interested in, you know, this could be a public report that's put on the public report portal, and the contractors can go access it themselves, and then you guys don't even have to do anything other than just tell them it's on the public report portal, go run it yourself.
Okay.
We do have those options available to us now as well. It's very handy, I think. Available to us now as well. It's very handy, I think. Other questions, guys?
I guess I got another one that's sampling checklist related.
Shoot, go ahead.
I had it happen 2 or 3 different times this year that I would get in and just kind of run a sampling checklist and kind of see if we were deficient in any areas, you know, prior to an estimate or whatever, prompting me to look into something. And I would find something on the sampling checklist that was highlighted as being, you know, deficient and needed sampled. And it may be something that we had already entered samples in under that item, or maybe it wasn't. But I would call down to, you know, Andy or Dave, or send an email or whatever, and they'd look in their database and say, well, we don't see any deficiencies here. So there's some differences between what was on the reports portal and maybe what you guys are able to look at down there. Is there any other comments that you've had on that issue?
Okay, yeah. So I think I know what the issue is here that you're describing. So just to clarify for everyone on the call, the sampling checklist report that you were utilizing earlier this year, I'm assuming that's the one on the report portal, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So for many years, up until about a couple weeks ago, we had I'm calling it the old version of the sampling checklist that was only accessible within Site Manager. And that sampling checklist, you know, looked very similar to the one that's on the report portal. and it had one key difference that was something that until about 2 weeks ago we hadn't replicated into the new sampling checklist. But what the old sampling checklist would do when you executed that process within Site Manager is it would go out and it would actually run a process on the server that would go in and make updates in the database, kind of, invisible to what you might be aware is what's happening there. And when it was making all those updates, it was updating, some of those numbers that you see on the sampling checklist as far as, how many samples are left and, how many samples you've taken, that sort of thing. But at the time 2 weeks ago when we took the old sampling checklist out of Site Manager, that old process, we disabled that. We made an update to the sampling checklist report that is on the report portal that you guys are utilizing now to make that report do those calculations as well. I hadn't taken under that effort until 2 weeks ago because I was envisioning that calculation was going to add tremendous amounts of time to the processing of the report, and I didn't want to have it impact your guys' user experience of that new report on the report portal. But after doing some testing and some, adding some of that coding to that report, we discovered that it didn't really add that much overhead to it. So we went ahead and got that put in place so it would perform those calculations and give you guys an updated representation of what those numbers should be. That process that updates all those numbers is something that also happens when you generate a pay estimate. So that may be why, depending on timing of things, if you were only utilizing the new sampling checklist earlier in the year, prior to, a couple weeks ago, and you'd look at that report and the numbers wouldn't quite make sense, and then you'd go generate an estimate, and then all of a sudden the sampling checklist would make sense. The new sampling checklist would make sense. That's kind of wise because the last version of the new sampling checklist was looking at those numbers in the database, how they had been stored from that other process that was running, as part of the pay estimate or old sampling checklist process. I'm going to stop right there and ask, is this making sense? Am I answering the question for you guys? I'm trying not to get too overly technical with it, but...
Yeah, I guess what I'm gathering is as of 2 weeks ago, that problem doesn't exist anymore.
It should not, no. It should be resolved. If it's still something that you're questioning and you're looking at it and you feel like you've put in sample records and the numbers just don't seem to be representing what you expect them to represent, just give us a call, and we can look into it and see if there's still an outstanding issue or something that needs to be resolved. But, as far as we are aware right now, that new sampling checklist should be, presenting all the same information in the same way that the old one did. So, sorry, long answer for your probably short question there. Am I answering? Did I answer all that question for you, Josh?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, great. Other questions, guys?
Well, I'll ask one on that sampling checklist again.
Go ahead.
So, trial and error, I figured out you have to print it the long way, otherwise you're going to get it chopped in half. So it has to come out portrait or landscape, not portrait or whatever. And that's fine. And it's about twice as many pages now. But so some are highlighted red, some are highlighted blue, some are highlighted yellow. Does it matter what you pick when you do a sample now? Do you need to pick complete and shipped? What do we need to pick when we make out samples now to know if they're done or not? I don't understand all the highlighting colors.
Sure. I'll actually share my screen and I can speak to some of that highlighting because the new sampling checklist on the report portal definitely is doing some things that the old one did not. Let me back up and touch on the first part of your comment there, the first question you had about the way that the sampling checklist is printing. Do you mind if I pick on one of your contracts, Sharon? Can I have your contract ID?
No, that's fine. And then also the concrete report does too come out that way when you want to print out your cylinder report.
Oh, sure. And I'm thinking the printing thing is going to be the same issue that we have with the sampling checklist, and it's something that we have a resolution for. And then once I get your contract pulled up here and I get my screen shared, well, I'll talk to what that issue is.
Okay.
What's a good contract ID for you?
1967X.
1967X. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm running the report right now for Sharon's contract ID that she was willing to let me utilize here for our discussion. So the first part of her comment has to do with when you're accessing the printing function of the report. It's a known issue. We found the resolution to it. I've been working with the report team and the database, the DBAs, to get the fix put in place. We've tested it in the demo version of the report portal. We just need to get it put in production. I'll take an action item to follow up with them again today. But what the issue is when you click on the print button here, it pops up and it may select, it brings in these properties, I'll say, that have to go with the report. So when we made this report, we specified that it's going to be a letter size, 8.5 by 11, and we also specified the page orientation. However, in our properties of our actual report, we have this specified as a landscape orientation instead of a portrait. But you saw when this first came up that it was defaulted to portrait, and the reason for that is it's a known bug with the report portal itself. Our properties are getting kind of lost somewhere and they're not coming up. Thankfully, we found the fix, and we just need to get it put in place for you guys, and that should resolve this issue. And you mentioned the other report. I'm guessing that report's the same way, Sharon. We have it specified as, a landscape orientation, but it's coming in as a portrait. The easy workaround for you guys that you can utilize until we get that, get those properties updated so it interacts properly for you guys, is you can go ahead and change this page orientation to landscape, and then when you click print, it does this converting to PDF. And you can, once it comes up maybe in this print preview, you can change some of your settings and maybe save it as a PDF and then print it from PDF. Or if it seems to look right here, like mine seems to look okay right now, I might go ahead and send this to my printer and just see how it comes out. But you just have to be, kind of be aware of those, those options that first come up, and if you don't change this from portrait, if you don't change it over to landscape, then that may, contribute to it, printing a little bit, kind of strangely. But like I said, hopefully this isn't going to be a long-term thing that'll be out there. We have a fix for it. We just need to get it put in place. So that's the first part of your comment, right, Sharon? Does that tackle that part of it?
That's what I did today, actually. I printed landscape, and it's coming out readable, all one page. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot. So kind of jumping into some of the other components of this report that are different from the old one. Certainly, we had some highlighting going on the old report. We've added some additional highlighting, and I'll explain what all that is. But one thing I would recommend is, I don't know if all you guys are taking your laptops with you out in the truck, out in the field. Certainly printing something out on paper, is handier to take with you if you're leaving the truck and you're going and walking, along your project or whatever the case may be. But if you have the ability and you're comfortable with it, I would recommend running this report and then saving it down as a PDF. Just because there is a even when you export it to a PDF, it retains all this, functionality that we've built into it, like with all these, these links and the highlighting and all that stuff. Whereas when you print it, you definitely lose some of that functionality. Just something to be aware of. But anyway, with the new report, and I might have just clicked on, oh, I didn't, okay. With the new report here, obviously, we have the fancy new logo up at the top. That's a change. We had some hyperlinks on the old report. Notably, we have the project manager. You can click on Bob's name here, and we can send him an email. Not sure why it's not popping up right now, but that should open up a mail window to Bob to send an email to him. Your sampling checklist, or excuse me, your sampling guide link right over here will actually open up the appropriate sampling guide for that, you know, that was in effect at the time that your contract was let. Oh shoot, now I'm gonna have to rerun this. I'm sorry, guys. Basically anything while this is loading, anything that you see that's, you know, got, you know, looks like a hyperlink, it will be a hyperlink. Is that 1967X, Sharon?
Yes.
Thank you. While this is loading, I'll quickly talk about these options up here at the top. You know, obviously the old sampling checklist, you had to pick your contract or type in your contract ID, but you didn't have all these other options available to you. And what all these other options are, hopefully they're fairly straightforward and explanatory. This one just allows you to hide or show the sample records. That's similar to, you know, that basically will just, you know, hide all of this information or show it, depending on if you have this set to yes or no. Show alternates, what this one will do, that has to do with, you know, on many of our materials we have, you know, what we call a required acceptance method or test. For instance, you know, for our earth fill testing here, Sharon has a required test of, you know, the LWD testing and also a required curve. But alternate acceptance methods would be these other tests down here that are available, but not something that we regularly do. And with this particular example, it's likely if you were using one of these tests, it's probably something that Mark Lindeman or the geotechnical unit would probably be giving you direction or the approval to use one of these other tests. But if you wanna hide the alternates, you can change that to no, and what that'll do is it'll hide all of this information. You know, just because these are the alternate tests or acceptance methods you could use, but they're not necessarily the ones that we expect you to use. Only show current remaining samples. You know, this one is set to no by default. Just that way the entire sampling checklist will show for you. But if you were to change this to yes, what this will do is it'll only show the line items with materials that have a required test remaining, or one that's highlighting in this pink or has a 1 next to it here. Anyway, so only show current remaining samples. If you set this to yes, it'll only return back the line items with materials that has a required test remaining on it. So that's your only show current remaining samples. Show line items with no material requirements. Very unlikely you would need to do this, but I left the option available to you. If we change this to yes, and I'll just do it really quick, what this will do is it'll return line items like mobilization, and all it'll do is it'll just give you a confirmation, kind of like the old sampling checklist would do. It'll show the line item, and it should say no testing required for this, you know, this line item. And that's, you know, you'd only really turn that option to yes, you know, if you had a line item that you're pretty certain you have testing that needs to happen on it, and you can't get that item to show up any other way. You know, there may be, you know, a possibility that, you know, something isn't hooked up properly in Site Manager to get that test associated. So that would be, you know, the most realistic case of the use of that parameter that I could think of. Otherwise, you know, you can see, you know, here's our mobilization, clearing and grubbing water. Obviously, no testing that we have to do with those things, so there's not really any need to show them on this report, but you can make them show up if you want. The last one here is show inactive materials. Not something another one you probably don't have to use a ton. This would only come into play, you know, for example, a few years ago when we made changes to how we do our soil compaction testing. When we undertook that effort, Mark Lindeman, I should say, requested that we try to simplify this process as much as we can in Site Manager, yet while retaining, you know, our ability to differentiate between the different types of compaction that he wanted to keep track of. So when we undertook that effort, for those who remember, for our soil testing, we probably had 10 or 12 different material codes for all the different soil compaction testing, and we reduced that down to 4. And when we did that, obviously there was a bunch of contracts that were, partially done with testing that had performed some of their testing under the old setup, and we added the new setup, kind of partway through the contract. So by switching this to be a yes, what this would do is it would show, the current material codes that are active on the contract, and it would also show any inactive materials that may also be there. So in that example, if, I don't know that your contract is old enough, Sharon, but if it was, it would show our 200 200 EF earth fill testing, and it would also show one of the other 200, SD codes that were utilized in the past to track, our compaction testing. So that's all those parameters up here at the top. Now to kind of jump down here to some of the highlighting that you see. The highlighting on the sample IDs, I believe that was on the old sampling checklist. When they highlight in a yellow color, it's just indicating that this particular sample record is not authorized, just to kind of make it stand out a little bit more. The highlighting over here, when it highlights in pink, it's just another way to draw your attention over to the fact that this isn't a 0, just as another visual cue, I guess. But displaying a 1 or displaying and highlighting in pink is kind of the same thing, or kind of the same deal. Do you have a line item that is showing any blue, Sharon, that you know of? Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you see the highlighting in blue like this, what that means is, and I apologize, I'm going to use some of our terminology around here. I don't know if everybody's familiar with it or not, but this is what we refer to as a ghost record. And it has to do with a process that has been in Site Manager or been a part of our setup in Site Manager for many, many years that was just never properly put together and never, properly completed. But how these ghost records are created is, I'm guessing, Sharon, when you started out for this contract, you logged a mix design right here, number 11, for, this, you hooked it up to this line item and maybe many other line items. But at the time when you hooked this up and you selected the Crete Beatrice concrete plant, what happens in the system is it copies the requirements. And what I mean by that is, so you created this sample record and associated it to this source. The system now expects a sample to be put in for, your compressive strength, cylinder cast, and then this proportions template. Keeping in mind that you could also utilize the other proportions template too, because it's the other proportions template is an alternate to this one. But when that copy happens, it puts this, this producer supplier or this source, it associates this test with this source. And if you never actually get a load of concrete from this source, then, this isn't really a true discrepancy because you never got a load of concrete from there. All we did is we just logged a mix design because you might potentially get concrete from there, is what I'm guessing is happening here. So this is a ghost. There's no actual sample records hooked up in the background that are causing this discrepancy that need to be authorized or anything. It's just that the system thinks there's a sample record needed there. This particular example is probably not a great example of a ghost because, I don't know where you're at in process here. I see this line item is completely installed, so it looks like it's all installed. Probably unlikely you're going to get more concrete for it, but if this was a different line item that you still had yet to install quantity, the potential still could exist to install concrete from this particular source. A better example of a ghost, and I don't know that I'll be able to find one here in your list, is if you create a sample record and you select one source and then you change that sample record source to be another source at a later point. When that happens, we basically end up with two of the same requirement in the background of the system, and that's where we have to go in and perform what we call that zero out, or we go in and simply just remove that you know, kind of duplicate requirement. You know, that's, hopefully if that's making sense as I'm describing it, you know, hopefully that, yeah, hopefully that makes sense, I guess. So I don't know how else to perfectly explain it, other than just it kind of creates an unnecessary duplicate record that just has to be cleaned up out of the system. One other thing of note on the report here is, you know, it doesn't necessarily highlight in blue, so you may not be aware that it's a link, but this little icon right here is actually the OnBase icon, and I don't know if I'll be able to zoom in on it super close to show it to you. And it doesn't look like it's letting me do any zoom, but right here, oh, there we go. Right here is the OnBase icon, and this is actually a link. And you guys can click on this, and it will go in and open up any docs, any documents that you've uploaded in OnBase associated with that sample record ID. Should open up in the OnBase window for you. You know, it's there as just you know, hopefully a quick way for you guys to go in and find those documents, as opposed to maybe utilizing one of the queries in OnBase or filtering down the doc types to find that. So just kind of a handy little thing. You know, certainly feel free to use that. Am I addressing all of the different colors and things,
Yeah,
Sharon,
so
that
the yellow
you brought
ones
up?
that are yellow, do I need to go in there and authorize those then? They're out there to be authorized, I guess.
My browser, unfortunately, is kind of stuck here. Let me try to refresh. So the ones in yellow, I'll try to answer it without the assistance of my visual here. But yes, there are sample records that need to be authorized. As far as who authorizes them, you know, that is dependent on the material. You know, if you were to go in and, you know, look at the, you know, if you know, like for the material, like for your soil testing there, I believe that was some of the ones that were unauthorized. Is that right?
Yeah, a whole bunch of them there.
If the only test that's on that sample record is just the test for the LWD testing, that is a sample record that you can authorize. However, if there is a lab test associated with your sample record, it's probably a good idea to ask the lab to authorize it, or at least ask them if you can authorize it for them. You know, just because they may still be performing testing on that particular record, and if we authorize it, we may inadvertently just kind of prematurely authorize it. It can obviously be unauthorized, and then things, you know, data can be entered. But you know, if we can, you know, avoid that extra step for anybody involved, it's certainly helpful. But for this example, go ahead, Sharon.
Is a little icon like on the old standard checklist going to come up that says we can authorize it or not on this new one?
You're talking about that little bug symbol?
That little square, yeah.
Yeah, with the square with the little lines coming off of it.
Yeah.
That symbol, I don't know. Let's see here.
You know, like your
yeah, I think
barricades and stuff like that, or just little things like your.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. The symbol, I think, is on certain materials. I can't remember all the materials that it's on right now.
On my old one I'm looking at, the erosion control was one that had that we could authorize ourselves.
That special symbol, I know that we had difficulty with it in the past as far as, you know, making it appear here in the new sampling checklist. It's just because it's a special symbol that it just doesn't translate well across all systems for whatever reason. But I know in recent years we haven't put as much emphasis on that symbol, and that's because we have a lot of materials that are kind of, where I'd say it kind of depends on who authorizes it because of what testing may be happening on that material. Kind of going back to my example of earth fill. you know, we wouldn't put the bug symbol, as we call it, that little odd symbol, we wouldn't put that on our earth fill material because, you know, there's field testing and lab testing that could be associated with that material. So what at least I've been recommending and what we've been recommending here is, you know, kind of what I was just kind of talking through a minute ago where, you know, if you look at the sample record itself and the only testing that's happening on it is a field test, because on all of our tests we've done a pretty good job noting whether it's field or lab. I guess this one here doesn't necessarily say lab on it, so not a good example for me to show, apparently. Here we go. Here's one that says central lab. But we've done a fairly good job of noting if it's field or lab at the end of the description of the template itself. So if the sample record only has field tests on it, I'd say you're safe to authorize that record. But if it's got a lab test on it, you know, then it's something that, you know, you would want to, you know, communicate with the lab to see if their testing is complete or why they haven't authorized that record yet. You know, so that's in part why we haven't put as much emphasis on that little symbol in recent years, just because it seems like there are so many materials, and there are, you know, it seems like the list is growing of, you know, the list of materials where, you know, it could be field authorized or it could be lab authorized. It just depends on the scenario of, you know, or the testing that's involved. So I feel like I'm not probably perfectly answering your question, Sharon, but is that kind of along the lines of an answer for you?
Is that one you would pick ready for review and your status then when you fill that out?
You certainly could. The purpose of ready for review is, you know, if you know, I'm guessing, you know, these soil tests here, this compaction stuff, you could certainly put these in ready for review. But I think, you know what your LWD testing is like, and if you guys are, you know, accepting that LWD result, I would, you know, I'm guessing Mark or Doug Churchill would just tell you guys, oh yeah, you can authorize those.
Okay.
But if you are uncertain and you want if you want the, you know, feedback from the lab, or you want a little affirmation from someone that, you know, that this is okay, that's certainly what that ready for review is for. You can select ready for review, and then depending on the time of day, the lab will receive a notification with your sample record in it, either that day or the next day, and it'll show them your sample record, and then they've been asked to go in and look at those sample records and, you know, make those kinds of assessments, or communicate with you as far as, you know, back out to you guys what actions may need to happen yet with it. So yeah, perfect thing to use ready for review for if you're uncertain about whether it's ready or not.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, did I answer all of your questions, comments on the sampling checklist, Sharon?
Yep.
We will take an action item here to maybe add a legend or something here on the sampling checklist report to maybe kind of explain out what some of the colors mean. That way it's not, you know, not so, you know, unknown. Other questions, guys?
Hey, Kai?
Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of switching gears away from materials, I had a change order question issue.
Okay, go ahead.
It's kind of been a long-term deal. It doesn't always do it, and I don't think I've ever complained about it. I just know what I got to do when it happens. But you can start a change order, you know, and do all your stuff on the first tab. And when you get into the actual adding items, sometimes the drop-down field where you select an item works. Sometimes it doesn't, and if it doesn't work, you can't do anything with it. You actually basically got to get clear out of Site Manager and get back in and take another run at it. Is there a particular reason why that might be hanging up and why it doesn't hang up every time? Anybody else ever complained about that?
Yes, I'd say that is an issue we are aware of, and this is Josh, by the way, Andy, in District 6. I don't know. Let's see here. I'm just going to try to open a change order and kind of point to the field that you're talking about. But what we're talking about, at least I assume what we're talking about, is this field right here where you do the right-click and search to select your item code. Is that where you're at, Josh?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. It's definitely an issue we've noticed, and we haven't been able to figure out, you know, why in some circumstances that right-click search doesn't work, and why it doesn't work in some cases and does in others. I remember when we upgraded to, you know, this version of Site Manager, this 17A version, gosh, a year and a half or 2 years ago, we identified the issue at that time, and we had Lee look into it, and it was just, we had a lot of difficulty trying to replicate the error. And, you know, for everything that we can see, it should always work, and we're not quite there as to figuring out why it sometimes doesn't work. But you have, you know, in the course of your describing your issue here, you have talked about the workaround, and you know, unfortunately, I don't know that I have a better recommendation for a workaround other than to, you know, maybe close the window, reopen it. You can try closing Site Manager and reopening it to try to get that area to work. But it's something that if you happen to, you know, figure out what the steps are that maybe make it happen, and you're able to share that with us, we'd be all ears to know what that, you know, what those steps might entail. And that's just because we haven't been able to, you know, completely duplicate it here on our end to try to fix it. I know I'm not really answering, probably, you know, perfectly answering your question there, Josh, or at least, you know, addressing the concern with a hopeful, yeah, we'll get that fixed. But is that kind of answering what you were talking about?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make sure somebody was aware of it. As far as like steps in the process of triggering it, I mean, I'm pretty sure I do it the same way every time, and like I said, sometimes it does it and sometimes it doesn't. Gary seems to think that if it's an issue where you're you know, kind of guessing by golly and what your item code is, that it's
Item number.
the item number. Oh, he's saying that maybe it's attributed to if you don't, like where item 4001 is there, if you're not sure what your next change order number is, and you punch one in and change that, and then it makes that next field not work.
If you do it a couple, 2, 3 times, sometimes it seems like it kicks it into gear. But like it throws that search out.
Yeah, that would be, you know, that's all certainly interesting stuff. You know, that's something I would have to admit I haven't tested, you know, trying to change that line item number numerous times to try to get that item code deal to, you know, to reactivate itself, if you will. But any kind of details like that are very, very helpful if you guys are able to share that kind of information with us. It just helps us troubleshoot the problem that much faster. So we'll take note of, you know, that line item number. You know, we've kind of tested it always as, you know, knowing what your next line item number is, and you punch it in, and you know, then it, like Josh described it, sometimes makes the item code act normally, and sometimes it doesn't. You know, but we'll take an action item to try, you know, seeing if there's a magic number of times or a way of interacting with that line item number field that affects the item code field. But in short, it was an issue that we were aware of. We just, you know, unable to successfully get it to happen all the time, so we can figure out how to fix it. I'm glad you moved over to change orders here, Josh. It's something I don't know that, you know, maybe wasn't perfectly clear with the invite today, but the questions can be for, you know, change orders, DWRs, can be construction or materials. You know, we're not just necessarily focusing on materials.
Okay, we got another one for you. We'll keep you going here.
Very good.
When you are assigning contract authority to people, is there any way to make it to where you don't have to do it one person at a time? Is there a way you could do a multi-click sort of deal so that you're not authorizing or unauthorizing, you know, when jobs are over even, so that process isn't so repetitive?
Sure. So the question is, you want to be able to assign your one contract, let's say 3250, you want to assign that to 3 or 4 people all at once rather than having to scroll through the list and find each person. Is that essentially the question?
Yeah, I think that's what Gary was asking.
So the short answer is in Site Manager, unfortunately, no, there's not any functionality right now that would allow us to do that. You know, if we were looking at this, you know, a few years, if this was a few years ago, you know, 3-4 years ago, maybe we would entertain the idea of creating a new window in Site Manager to assist you guys in doing that. But given that the time that we're going to be utilizing Site Manager is relatively short, and look at that, Outlook's restarting, and we're trying to minimize, you know, how much stuff we change about Site Manager, mostly having to do with time, our time availability. Gosh, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat, guys. I apologize. We're trying to basically just, you know, keep Site Manager working as is, so we can focus all of our efforts on the new web system. So back to Gary's question is, unfortunately, no, Site Manager doesn't allow it, but the web version of Site Manager will allow you to do it from a contract basis or an individual basis. Future functionality to look forward to in our web platform. Is that answering the question for you guys? Josh, Gary, is that kind of answering your question? I know it's probably not what you were looking forward to hearing, but.
Oh, that's not what we're looking for, but that's okay. No, I'm kidding. No.
One thing you could consider doing with this window, and I believe it was Bob who did one of these WebEx recording sessions earlier this summer, was you can think about utilizing the filter function, and any window that you can basically do this right click on. You can do one of these things, and I'm a big fan of the filters. So you can see right now I've actually got a filter where or everybody might have this filter where it filters down to the active, only active personnel. But you could add, more criteria to this. So you could say, I want to see people who are only the people who are in District 6, let's say. And then it'll filter my list down to only District 6 personnel. So it makes the list a lot shorter to scroll through. If you have specific people that you are looking for, let's see, and you know all their DOR numbers, you can simply just add. You can do ands and ors here, and you can say I want this user ID or this user ID. So you can create a filter so it filters it down to just your staff. So that way you don't have to scroll through a big list of all the names in Site Manager. And then you can save this filter, and you can make it your default so it always opens this window up this way. Definitely useful tools to utilize if you haven't already, these filters. And these filters can be done on any window in Site Manager. I just happen to be on the Contract Authority window, but you can do it on where you're picking DWRs or picking contracts. Anywhere that you attempt to right-click on one of these headers and say filter, and you get this little pop-up window, you can apply filters to it. And then it's just a matter of, selecting your criteria to make it do what you want it to do. So while I may not have what you're exactly looking for, but hopefully this may be something that you can utilize while you're still in Site Manager. Any further questions, comments about Contract Authority while we're in here, guys? Josh, Gary, you guys have anything else for Contract Authority, or did I kind of address all the parts there for you?
That's helpful, doing the filter thing anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, check that out. But also, keep in mind, look forward to the web platform. We'll be able to do it in both ways in the web platform, either at a individual person level or at a contract level. I know for a certainty that functionality will exist for you guys. got about 15 minutes left on the call, guys, before, you know, some of us have to go to other things, but totally willing to stay on the call and continue answering questions. Just keep shouting them out. Bueller. If there aren't any more specific questions, I guess, you know, I would have a question for you guys. Have you guys been finding these WebEx, you know, meetings useful to log on and listen to me or one of my staff, you know, offer up some tips and tricks, or, you know, explain functionality in Site Manager or with our reports? You know, I know we've kind of done them, you know, fairly consistently over the course of the summer, and we've got a bunch of stuff recorded, and it's all available out on the YouTube channel. But have you guys found these to be useful?
Yeah, District 6 has. You know, there was several of them that kind of were offered earlier in the fall that we weren't necessarily able to attend just because construction was still ongoing. So, you know, like this time frame is, you know, we had a few more people that could actually sit in on it, and we know you've been recording them, so we have the opportunity to listen to them later. But as far as being able to be live and maybe have some input or ask questions and stuff like that, if they could be more, you know, I don't know, construction season's hard to predict, you know, as far as when people will be shutting down, but maybe if we could have them more wintertime, where we have a better chance of having representation.
Yeah, certainly. We're gonna try to keep doing them, you know, as consistently as we can. You know, we've got a list of topics of things that, you know, we just, you know, pick things off the list and do that topic. If you guys have a topic you'd like us to cover, you can certainly submit a request to us to cover a certain topic or something you think would be useful that we can talk about or go over with everyone. You know, we can do more sessions just like this one as well, where it's just kind of open forum if you think that today's session has been useful too. I know Andy did one of her recordings on basically on the M&R website, but you know, really quick here, I'll just refresh everybody's memory on where everything is at. So I'll start from the home page. If you go to our dot.nebraska.gov homepage, and you go to, Business Center, Materials, and then we have our Materials Management Guidance page right now. You know, we may endure an effort here in the future to kind of reorganize this a little bit, just because we're certainly starting to add a lot of other discussion on here, like construction-related things. But for now, everything is still, you know, put together on this page, whether it's instructions or videos or quick reference guides. But if you make this one of your favorite pages or one of your bookmarks, that's certainly a good deal. You know, otherwise, you can go out to to the DOT YouTube site. And you can actually navigate around and find all of our, you know, previously recorded WebEx meetings, just like this one, out there. I believe Mackenzie's got a playlist made for all of them, and they're all right here. I see that the playlist only shows 6 videos right now, but it seems like we may have done a few more than that, so we'll have to check on that and see if all of our recordings have been posted by Mackenzie. But you can see we've got a few of them out there anyway. So certainly a useful resource if you didn't get a chance, like Josh was saying, to join one of those earlier meetings this summer, whether you were out on the project or what the situation might have been. But we try to make all of these available up here. I know we've had one or two of the recordings where something happened to the recording and we lost it, and I know we've been working on trying to re-record some of those, but we'll definitely be posting more stuff here, so something to keep an eye on. Are there any more questions from anybody on the call? Otherwise, I might have Andy jump in and review all the action items that we came up with for the meeting, just so you guys are aware as a refresher of all the action items we came up with. So last opportunity for a question. Hearing no questions, Andy, go ahead and let's review our action items that we came up with for today's meeting.
I have an action item where we're going to work with Sherry Van Diest to look into standalone and the inability to get the proportions no mix to work correctly. I have an action item to follow up with the DBAs to find out when they have implemented the changes to the sampling checklist to get the print function to work. I have the print properties to work. I have an action item to create a legend for the sampling checklist and get that particular thing added so that we can identify what the different highlights mean, that sort of thing. I have an action item to try and nail down the steps to replicate the problem that occurs with change order functionality. And I may have to get a little more information about how to get I'll need to get some of those steps jotted down so that we can try and replicate that problem. I also have an action item for us to follow up with the web team to find out where all of those recordings are, because they should all be out there, and we have a lot more than 6 recorded. So I'll follow up with Mackenzie and see what we can do to find out about that. Did I miss anything?
Those are all that I can remember, Andy. Certainly anybody else on the call can jump in if they remember another action item. I just wanted to offer one more thing about the change order item issue. Gary or Josh, if you guys would be willing to call in and give Andy some more details as to what steps you guys may have seen that would be useful for our notes, and they would be much appreciated.
Okie dokie.
Well, all right, guys. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and we'll definitely get another one scheduled here. We'll probably do maybe one more of these WebExes before the Christmas holiday season, and then maybe we'll hold off on doing any others until after the first of the year, just because of everybody possibly taking vacations and whatnot. But we'll come back after the first of the year and get started and try to get a few more of these done before you guys get back into construction season. So just remember my challenge. If you have a topic you want us to cover or you don't think we've covered yet, certainly just shoot us an email, me or our shared email inbox, and that's the NDOT AW Project Support at nebraska.gov email. And just let us know what topic you want to see. Otherwise, just look forward to our calendar invites when they come your way.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yep. Thanks for joining, everybody.